Tree identification is always a popular subject in arboriculture, forestry, horticulture, gardening. And every once in a while you get a couple of species that give you a gift, and that is that they're much more easily identified than other species in terms of differentiation between the two of them, and in this case on a year-round basis. For purposes of today's video, those are Betula papyrifera. Now I'm saying Betula because I believe that's how it ought to be pronounced. Some people say Betula. I was taught in school when I was studying Spanish that the stress should go on the penultimate syllable, Betula. Let's argue about it, okay? So Betula papyrifera, the paper birch, also known as the canoe birch, like so many other species, has a lot of common names, but here in New England, typically called the paper birch or the white birch. There's almost chalky residue that you can get off of this sometimes. See it sticking to my fingers there. It's kind of fun. We actually don't plant these that much anymore, unfortunately, because of two particular insect pests. One is the bronze birch borer, and the other one is called the birch leaf miner. And they pretty much do what it sounds like. The bronze birch borer is the larva of which crawls around underneath the bark and eats up the vascular cambium tissue. And you can actually, sometimes you can actually see a lump. It's almost like a varicose vein. It's pretty ugly, and that is the tree's reaction to the tunneling of that insect larvae. And then the birch leaf miner is an insect, the larvae of which actually sets up shop between the layers of the leaf itself and eats what's in between. You can see leaves get skeletonized by the birch leaf miner. Pretty problematic. So we actually don't plant these that much anymore. Coming back a little bit, there has been some work on some resistant cultivars, of course. The second tree for today is Betula alleghaniensis, which is the yellow birch. Look how different this texture is. And imagine that you could see both of those in the wintertime next to each other, and it's pretty easy to tell the difference. This one, its shagginess is somewhat like Betula nigra, the river birch, but this is much more of an upland forest species. So it's not likely that you're going to see them growing right next to each other. Not impossible, but not that likely. Yellow looking bark, yellow to gold, kind of bronzy. Don't worry about these lichens and discoloration here. They're very, very normal, common occurrence, but it's this exfoliating bark here that I want you to zero in on. The leaves are very similar, like all birches. They are serrated. The paper birch is, the leaf margin is a little bit more coarse, whereas the yellow birch leaf is more consistent and kind of a finer tooth in terms of its serration. Slight difference in leaf shape, but it's that margin that I usually cue in on. But the bark is a dead giveaway. One of the cool things about the birches is that they have photosynthetic structures here on their bark, not just on their leaves. So they actually have the ability to photosynthesize here in the tissues located in these horizontal structures called lenticels. That's something that occasionally happens on smooth bark species like the cherries and the birches especially. And you can see those lenticels as well over here on the yellow birch. Let's see if I can get a little further away here so you can see them both. Right here is the yellow birch and two stems, and over here is our paper birch. Neither of them are particularly long-lived trees. They're not particularly tall trees either. They are pioneers, especially the paper birch. If there's disturbance, So 500 years ago, it would have been after a forest fire, after storm damage, after a bunch of big blowdowns or a tornado or hurricane. Birches and the white pines and the red cedars would have been the first thing to come into a disturbed area and eventually be overtaken by the taller canopy trees, including those white pines, but also the red oaks and the sugar maples and the hickories that are native to the Northeast. That's part of why they're not so long-lived. They do grow fast, but they kind of live hard and die young. You can expect a tree to get up to be about 18, 20 inches in diameter breast height before it's going to keel over. It's also not rot resistant either. And when they get shaded out and they can't maintain that vigor and to compete with the other trees, then they'll just kind of keel over and die. They're also pretty soft-wooded, so they're especially prone to damage in winter storms. And you'll see that in the context of the landscapes because we love our birch trees so much. We'll plant paper birches, we'll plant river birches, especially in those clumps. And then when the ice storm comes along, they just get bent over and splayed, sometimes all the way over to the ground. Because they're so flexible, sometimes they can recover from that, other times not. But as opposed to other species, which would just completely snap if that ever happened to them, these particular species are very bendy, so they'll move around and adapt in that respect. Building materials, needless to say, the paper birch used for canoes and paper and fire starters, and terrific ornamental value and terrific firewood in the sense that you can light it with a match, almost literally. That peel off that fine bark, you can light it with a match. And same with the exfoliating yellow birch. That's just not, it's a much lesser known tree, unfortunately. So I would like to see more of the yellow birch planted in landscapes. We don't have so much of the same insect and disease problems with those as we do with the paper birch. But it's just not one of those things that has caught on as yet. The gray birch is one we should be looking at. The black birch is one we should be looking at. Those are very important components of our forest ecosystem and our forest community. And they should be incorporated more into our landscapes as part of our striving towards more diversity in our personal forests and our natural forests. So, paper birch, yellow birch, Petula paperifera, Petula alleganiensis. Thanks for watching. Thanks.